So we've created the majority of our design assets. We've used everything from Figma to Cinema 4D and Octane, and of course, Adobe After Effects. And as a reminder,
we also used Adobe Premiere.
We never used Premiere.
Swipe on the iPad.
Okay, here's the first lesson. Here's the second lesson. Here's Miguel. Here's where Vlad randomly replaced Miguel.
That's just a picture of Dreamer.
Okay, this one's... Okay, that's odd.
What's odd?
Were you here before?
Keep going.
This is when you said keep going.
Next.
Okay, this is Team of Rivals by Doris Kearns Goodwin.
Which is on the shelf behind you. Proof that this has been edited in Premiere.
You know what? You're right. This team is extremely skilled in using Adobe Premiere to edit. In this lesson, we're starting from a completely blank site in Webflow, and we'll build out the entire site, this full page design, covering all the fundamentals along the way. If you're already familiar with Webflow or the principles of HTML and CSS, this should go pretty quick. And if you're all new to this, or you're generally used to working with template-based software, we'll make sure to take our time and give you every tool you need to be successful. And when it comes to migrating from the design phase to the development phase, there are several schools of thought. Some people get really high fidelity in Figma. Some people go for that fidelity in Webflow. But we've used Figma in this example to develop sort of a medium or mid-fidelity design. And we'll be taking a lot from that design, but also adapting it to be fully responsive. All generating production-ready code will publish straight to our domain, our main.com. Now, not everyone will design this way or develop using the exact steps in this course, and that's good. Some people will prefer to hand code. Others will want to use a template, and a lot of people will do neither. And that's the beauty of developing your own design and development toolbox. Rarely is there an absolute right or an absolute wrong. This is just one way of doing things. For us, we'll break this lesson down into 6 parts. We'll build our hero section and cover the etymology of the term hero section. Then we'll do our navigation, our product features, our featured logos section, our contact form, and our footer. And that's going to be it. And if you don't want to use Webflow, that's okay. The vast majority of what we're covering with development, with layout, it's the same CSS that developers use to build apple.com and stripe.com. So while we develop visually, we'll often reference our CSS right in the Webflow Designer. So you can follow along regardless of your development environment. Let's get started with our first part, the hero section. And here we are in Webflow, completely blank project, nothing selected. Let's start, of course, by dragging in our assets. And we can just highlight all of these. This is everything we've exported before. And we just drag this right into Webflow like this, and it all imports into our assets panel. Now, depending on your preference, we could use this time to load in fonts. Sada, what's your preference here?
Let's start by adding in our fonts.
Okay, so we can click the body element. This is just the base. This is the top level element. This is the page itself. So with the body selected, we unlock all of our options over here in the style panel. And this has all of our CSS here, from position, typography, borders, effects, things like backdrop filters, all of that over here in the style panel. So what we'll want to do to load in our fonts is we'll select Arial right here, and we can go up and add fonts.
Perfect. Let's do it.
Of course, we can use Google fonts, we can use Adobe fonts, we can use custom fonts if we want to upload our fonts manually. We'll use Google fonts. Of course, we know we want to grab Inter. In fact, if we reference our Figma, we know we have Playfair Display Bold, we have Inter Medium. So Inter Medium, of course, is 500, and then Inter Regular 400, and that might be it.
I think we used bold on the links. Yes, there we go.
Okay,
yes.
And we left social twice, so let's revisit that when we build in Webflow. So, okay, we have those fonts to load. Let's go and do Enter. Just typing Enter to skip to the font. Let's do that, and we're gonna load 400, 500, 700,
yes.
Add. And then one more, which is Playfair
Display.
Playfair Display. Okay, and we'll load uncheck regular. It's just going to be bold 700, add font. So now that it's loaded up, we can switch back over to the designer. And as we know, we're splitting this into multiple sections. We'll start with the hero section. So the hero section, of course, is going to go into our page body. So we said over to the right, this is all our CSS, all of our styles. How do we add our HTML? In other words, how do we add elements? Well, let's just go to add elements over here in the add panel. And we can start with a section. And let's drag the section. In this case, let's drag it right into the canvas. And that's our section. We have a section. Now, we could go and style this right now. We could start making the background black. We could start doing things like that. But for right now, let's get all the elements on the page first. Let's go and add our heading. So we know we can drag our heading in right into the section here. So we can even see our hierarchy to the left. We have the body. Inside the body is the section. Inside the section is the heading. We know the heading is supposed to say, introducing Carbeek. Excellent.
Yes.
And we have two more elements here. Of course, we have the kind of text block. We can call it a text block. We can position this one actually in the navigator. We can do it on the canvas, or we can do it right here in the navigator. We want it under the heading, but still in the section. So we have the text block, and it says it's Seltzer from the future, but in this case, let's just go to Figma and copy this. Copy to our clipboard, back to Webflow, paste. One more element, and we're gonna go in here, grab a paragraph, and drag that, we can use the canvas this time, underneath it's Seltzer from the future. So we have our paragraph, back to Figma, copy, back to Webflow,
Paste.
paste. And that's it. Those are our elements. Doesn't look perfect right now, but that's because we haven't styled very much anything. So of course, to style, let's style. Let's start with the section. Let's select the section itself. And we could go and scroll down and choose to make the background color black. We could, of course, select the font color and make it white so its children inherit that white font color. That's one way to do this. But to save a lot of time later, let's actually undo a few times. And instead of changing everything on the section, let's start with the body. Let's set some top level direction on the body. So with the body element selected, we can go down and change the background color. And this will affect the whole page. And let's do black for the background color. And of course, let's change our font color. If we reference in Figma, of course, we have pretty close to white. It's F6, F6, F6. So back to Webflow. We can just simply F6, F6, F6. And that applies on all of these. In fact, in Webflow, we can select, introducing Carbeek here. There's no class, there's nothing like that on this. This is just a heading. We just drop the heading right inside the section. We can go and see that the font color right here, we can click this little amber indicator. Amber means it is inheriting a value. This value is coming from the body. We just styled the body itself. So that amber indicator indicates that something is being inherited. So if we change the color on the body to, let's say, red, change the font color to red. Of course, now we click our heading or even our paragraph, it's inheriting that from the body. Of course, red looks hideous, so let's undo. So it goes back to F6, F6, F6.
Perfect.
Great. So we're getting there. We have some of the colors correct. Let's select our section and start styling some of these things. So with our section selected, we can do a few things to size the section appropriately. If we look at our reference here, we have a section that is sized here, it looks like about 587 pixels. We could do that right in Webflow. We could develop right here. We can set the height to 587 pixels. That's not right. 587 pixels. And now we have that section height. We could do a whole bunch of things to center this. We could choose Flexbox, vertically stack things, and instantly start messing with alignment. That's one way to do it. That's one way. But let's undo a few times and actually go back to the way it was. In fact, let's make sure we undo the height as well. Because there's another way to do this so it dynamically sizes itself based on the content inside. And the way to do that, of course, is with padding. Padding is the space inside of an element. So if we click and drag right here on padding, we're adding space inside the section. So we can see the section got taller and space was added inside. We hover over, we see that green indicator to show the spaces inside. We add padding on the left, now we have space on the left. If we hover over the padding indicators now, we can see padding has been added there too. Let's undo on the left. And let's actually add padding on the top and bottom. Now, we can click and drag one by one, or we can hold down Option or Alt, click and drag any one of them, and the opposing sides adjust. So maybe let's start with 250 pixels there?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, so now we have that height, and the reason we're choosing to go with padding here is, notice how if we add more headings, let's just imagine we're adding more headings. Introducing Carbeek 5 times. Notice how the top and bottom, the entire size of that section vertically has increased. And that's because it's still adding 250 on both sides. This is really important for responsive design because as things get tighter, as the viewport gets tighter, your paragraph can take up multiple lines, and therefore the size of the content can change. So we want our section here, at least in this example, to respect the content inside. So that's a good starting point. What about the left and right? Well, we could just add padding on the left and right, but here's the problem. Even if we add some padding in pixels or percent, if we get on a larger display like a Pro Display XDR or a much larger display in terms of pixels, these things get really tough to read when you're going all the way from one side to the other. That was an excellent visual. In fact, can you do that again for...
All the way from one side to...
But perhaps the inversion because the camera is showing from the pace is grueling.
Not everyone is a fast reader.
That's fair assessment. Okay, so one way we can take care of this to set that constraint is, of course, to use a container. Now, we're gonna go to the add panel and we'll drag a container right inside of our section. It doesn't do anything right away, it's just sitting there, but we can already see it has that constraint from left to right. So we could just click and drag each of these elements right inside. Now, when we're talking about HTML and CSS, order in which our HTML is generated, our production HTML and CSS are generated, is going to reflect what we just did. So of course, now we have our section. In the section is a container to keep everything neatly constrained. And of course, we have our heading, text block, and paragraph. So we're doing pretty good here. Let's select our container and let's set its maximum width. Right now it's almost 1000 pixels wide. We can go a little wider and set maybe 1200 here. So what we're doing is reflecting that sort of container, that alignment point we created here in our mockup. Of course, we can turn that grid on and see what that grid view looks like. We're doing the same thing right here in Webflow. We're setting that constraint of 1200 pixels. And hold down Option and drag, and we can make it tighter. Of course, maximum width will do 1200 for now, but that's how we change our container width. So that's looking pretty good. One more thing to note is that the paragraph here is going all the way from the left to right. We could make that a little more narrow. What do you think?
We can, yeah. And it's also Arial, it's not Enter.
Oh, good call. We could do this one by one. If we're using this like we would a traditional Word document without styles, we would go and change each of these one by one. We could just change this to Playfair. We could change everything one by one. But one really great way in HTML to save time in CSS is to use a parent element like the body. And of course, to select the font there. And notice how when we change it on the body, it's inherited. These font changes are inherited on each of its child elements. So we'll of course choose Enter. And by default, it's using Enter 400. And now if we go in here, we know that heading needs to be Playfair. So we can just change to Playfair Display. And we know this text block needs to be changed to Enter 500. And we can go right into Figma and pull all of our values here. So we know this is about 48, 49 pixels in terms of size. Back to Webflow, we do the same thing, 48 or 49 pixels in size. We can do the same thing with our text block, make that a little bit larger. We can just eyeball it in this case. And of course, for our line height, it's going to use the default right here, which is 20. That's a little shorter than this line height. So we always could switch to unitless, which is 1 hyphen. And that means the line height is going to reflect that font size. So as we increase the font size, so too does the line height increase. We're gonna undo that, maybe 20, let's just eyeball it. 25 looks good. What do we have in Figma? It was 27, close enough, looking pretty good. Let's get all the stuff on the page. And then of course we have our text block, which has Enter 14. That might be a good default. Again, if we wanna set our defaults on the body, we could select our body and set maybe 16, maybe it's a little more legible. And of course, on this text block right here, we can click and drag to add space outside. This is margin, space outside. So to review real quick, let's do a quick review of padding and margin. Padding is the space inside an element. You add padding to something, it creates extra space inside. Margin is the space, of course, around that element, on the outside of that element, between that element and other elements. When should we use padding? When should we use margin? It's often up to you, but if we want the inside of an element to grow in size, or we want some space for the elements inside of that, we can use padding. Margin creates, of course, space on the outside, so we can control that distance between that element and other elements around it. So this is a good start. Let's set We have everything right here in our container. Let's set a maximum on this paragraph right here. We can just set a maximum width. I'm gonna set it to 600 pixels, maybe 5.
What about doing 60 ch?
That is a great point. So ch is character units. All of our CSS, so if we go in here in terms of max width, we have all of our CSS units right here from pixels to ems to rems, ch. If we choose ch here, ch represents the number of characters in the currently selected object. So if we set it to what Sarah just said, which was 60 ch, that will be equal to 60 of the number 0 in whatever font is applied to this element. So in that case, that's enter. It's going to equal, in fact, we can test this right now. We can type 60 zeros.
Well, you know, you can also copy paste.
60?
Yeah, 60.
60. So That's 60 zeros. And if we did, let's say 50 CH, that's 50 zeros. And this is a good way to set maximums on text-based elements when we don't want it to go too wide from left to right. Generally 50 or 60 CH, that's a good maximum travel distance from reading from the left to the right. So back to 60. So perfect. We have this. This is looking pretty good right now. Let's set our background on our section. Now, one thing to note in Webflow, we've kind of skipped over this, or we've worked really quickly, so we haven't covered this yet, is that when we've been adding different styles to each of these, it's automatically been creating classes. And classes are the basis for CSS. Classes work like this. If we have two headings, let's just hit copy and paste, and they both have the class heading applied. Again, that was automatically created when we created our first change, which was our Playfair display and our size. When a class is applied, notice how this says heading and this says heading. In fact, if we rename it and we say big hero heading, notice how this one's changed as well. They both have the same class applied. When we copied and pasted, the same class got moved to the other one as well. But if we change one of them, notice how it actually changes both. And if we set the line height on this same way, 1 unitless with just a hyphen there, notice how it scales beautifully. Now, what classes do is they don't just let us save time, which they absolutely do, but they keep things neat and consistent from page to page, from section to section, and they reduce the total number of styles that we're going to have to manage in our project. Keeps things neat and consistent. So we don't need two headings for this. Let's remove that heading. Oh yeah, sure.
So can you change like the title of the heading?
The title of the heading.
But have the same class.
Oh, you're talking about demonstrating, okay, excellent point. It doesn't have to be the same exact text. So if we have two of these, again, we demonstrated with the class, it's introducing Carbeek twice. Let's say, hello, Sarah.
Hello.
How are you today?
Pretty good, thank you.
Great. All right, so if we resize this, of course, it's different content inside. Excellent point to make. But now we're going to delete this message to you.
Perfect. So classes is only affecting the styling.
And styling in CSS, we're going to get into a lot of stuff here. Styling, it's not just font color. It's not just font weight. It's not just typography. It's anything in the style panel. So this gets really, really powerful. So this is the primary structure of our section. Of course, we have one more thing before we're done with the hero section. And that, of course, is our Carbeek water bottle background render that we did. Let's go down with our section selected. And let's actually name section. Let's call this hero section, just to keep things organized. And let's add an image. So under backgrounds, we're going to go and add an image. By default, it says background image. That's not what we want. Let's choose an image. And of course, we imported all of our assets. So we'll just go over and hover over to hero image. Now, by default, it's going to place it in with default sizing, but let's make sure we have cover selected. Cover is going to fully cover the width and the height of the currently selected object. So this is pretty good. We can also change the position, so we can have it cover from the center, from the bottom. Maybe from the bottom might be good for this. And we can simulate. Let's just grab the edge at any time. We can grab the edge of our design right here in the designer and click and drag as the width, as things change, we can see what that looks like right on the canvas. So in fact, one way to not only look at desktop, this is our desktop breakpoint, we can go in preview mode, let's click that, and we can do the same thing. We can grab the edge, click and drag, and go through all of our interfaces. Now it's fully responsive by default, but we have some changes to make a little bit later on some of our smaller breakpoints. But for now, that's looking pretty good. Introducing Carbeek. It's Seltzer from the future. So far, so good. We could actually size this a little bit differently. It's looking a little bit shorter in Figma here. We could go to Webflow and maybe delete some of that padding. Option, click to adjust both sides at once. And 200 might be a good number.
Yeah, let's do 200.
Okay. And then noticing there's a lot of this pink and we don't really see up there. We could just eyeball this, but let's switch to center. It's looking a little better. And if we wanted, it might make sense to actually remove some of that padding on the bottom. Let's just undo, just remove some of the padding on the bottom and maybe put some more. We're just eyeballing this right now. There's a lot of ways to position, but what if we do 50 on the bottom and 350 on the top?
That looks good.
But that's the change on our hero section. Just eyeballing this right now, we might want to decrease. What do you think about decreasing the size of the?
Yeah, we can decrease the size a little bit. Let's do 48.
48? Okay.
No, not on that one.
Go to 48?
On the heading.
Oh, you want it on the heading, 40. Yeah. Oh, so 1 pixel. If you did a side by side with 48 and 49.
It's gonna be a huge change.
Okay, so 48 it is then. And you wanted 48 as well in this text block?
No.
Or do you want larger?
No, smaller.
Okay. Just say when?
Not that. A little bit. Right there.
26?
Yes.
Okay. What about the spacing in between big hero heading and this text block right here?
We can increase the spacing a little bit.
Okay. Here's 20.
No. Decrease.
15?
Was it 15 from the bit? No.
Oh, it was 10. So we have big hero heading, 15 pixels to this. Do you want the consistent spacing? You want 15 here too?
Yeah.
What about this just color is hanging over the edge right here? What if we set the maximum width to a few, something like that, maybe closer to 45, so that it's not kind of knocking over to the side?
Looking pretty good.
Agreed. So if that's the desktop, if this is what loads on a desktop browser, what happens when we load it on a tablet or a mobile device in landscape mode or portrait mode? Let's see. So let's preview. We can click and drag. Test fluidity and responsiveness. It is getting a little tight over here on the left side. We could add on our container itself, could add some spacing on the left and right. So the maximum width is 1200. This is actually narrower than that. We're getting over here. We're just grabbing and testing responsiveness and fluidity here. And at 992 pixels down here, which we can see down there, it's a little tight. Of course, that's less than 1200 pixels. So let's set some padding on the left and right. With the container selected, let's hold down Option and add, what do you think, 40 pixels on the left and right?
Yeah, 40 would be great.
Okay, so we have 40 there. So now, as it approaches the edge, it gets narrower and narrower until it hits the container. And inside the container, we know there's 40 pixels, so it is now pushing the text narrower. That looks pretty good. What about tablet? Let's click tablet. Now, the way Webflow works is everything that's set on our base breakpoint here in desktop will actually pass down. It'll cascade down to tablet and mobile landscape, mobile portrait. So the changes we made here, they're automatically being passed down to tablet. So we can make a more specific override on tablet though. So if we want to make a change, let's say we want to decrease the heading size, just a few changes here real quick. Just make a few. Actually, that font size might be good for the hero. Maybe this goes up to 24, this goes up to 40. Let's just estimate. Actually, a little bit better. Maybe the top has a little bit less padding because we have more limited real estate on a smaller device. Let's do maybe 300 there. So what that did was it made a few changes to the styles. So you see the smaller heading here. If we go back to the base breakpoint though, it's still larger, it's still 48. So it's on tablet that we can make a more specific change. Of course, everything is set on the base breakpoint. We can override on more specific breakpoints, on lower breakpoints like tablet. So if that's desktop or base breakpoint and that's tablet, what about mobile landscape? Well, mobile landscape will actually inherit everything from tablet. Noticing a pattern here. So if we want on mobile landscape, let's say it's a lot more limited real estate here. Let's select the section and decrease the padding even more. Something like that. Maybe even add, just for legibility, we could add a gradient. We can add a gradient over to increase legibility. Let's select gradient. Let's select our second stop. Let's do a darker color with maybe no opacity and just adjust our angle here. So we're just adjusting our angle visually. Pull this up a little bit just so we have that increased visibility there, maybe a little lower on the alpha, on the opacity there. It's looking pretty good. Notice how that specific style applied to mobile landscape, but if we go back up to tablet, we don't have that gradient. It doesn't even exist. That's because, again, things cascade down in one direction only. We can make a more specific change here and it doesn't affect the larger breakpoints. So that's how we get styling a little more specific. Of course, we could decrease the same here, make it a little bit more reasonable for mobile devices. We could say on mobile devices, we want our paragraph size with our body selected. We could say we want our default size of text to be, say, 14 pixels.
Yeah, 14 is good.
I think 14 is good on mobile, or even 13 or 14.
Yeah, I just realized we haven't done the height on the paragraph.
Got it. Okay, so a couple changes here. And this is when we can do the same type of development work. In fact, at any point, we can go to Help down here. Let's turn on CSS Preview so we can see the exact CSS that's being generated here. We could, if we click here, we see this paragraph. We have the maximum width, 45 ch. That's the only thing we've styled on paragraph. But what Sada just said was we haven't set the line height on the paragraph itself. So if we select our body, we can see one of our changes. We can see font size. We see our font family. We can see the font or the color here. We have that light gray color. But we could use the unitless line height here. Now, why do we keep going over to body? Why aren't we just changing one by one, paragraph by paragraph? Again, text inheritance in CSS and HTML, text inheritance works like this. The parent element, the top level element, sets the rules for all the children. You can always override. This doesn't mean all text on the page is always going to be F6, F6, F6. We can make changes. But by setting top level changes to typography, we save ourselves the work of having to do this manually on each and every element. So let's do that. Let's do let's say 1.4. Well, that's wrong. That's 1.4 pixels. Let's change that to unitless. This time let's go here to unitless, and now that's 1.4. Again, as we scale, everything, the line height will scale accordingly. So what do we have? We had 16.
And that looks good.
So if we go back to your point, if we go back here, now that we switched this in the body to 14, it's now the line height of 1.4 relative to 14. So if we just take 14 times 1.4, it is 19.6 pixels. That's automatically being calculated. We don't have to worry about it. So
that's math.
That is indeed math. All right, so that's our paragraph. Anything else to change in mobile landscape here?
It looks great, yes.
Okay, mobile portrait, last but not least. Okay, things are getting a little tight. It might be worth noting that back in mobile landscape, things could get tighter as well, and it might be worth, what do you think, less on the container?
Oh, the padding, yeah. Do 20.
Okay, 20 on the left and right.
So half.
Yeah, and then if we go to, there we go, so we have that space back.
Yeah.
It's looking a little better. What do you think about the font size here on mobile portrait? It's a decent font size.
Let's decrease the subheading a little bit too.
Okay, so 19, let's bring that down to what?
18?
18?
Or do 17.
You want 17 pixels. All right, 17 pixels there. And then of course we're inheriting that 14 pixels. If we want to check at any time, let's see where that size is coming from. We know that's coming from the body. So while we're on the subject, what is the difference between an amber indicator on a label and a blue indicator on a label? Well, if we go back to mobile landscape, that's of course where we made the change to 29 pixels for the heading size. If we go back to mobile landscape here, we see that the size is a blue label and the color is an amber label. Well, we know the color is amber because it is inheriting that value from the body. But a blue label means that this particular breakpoint, so mobile landscape, and this particular style has been changed. Notice how we made the change here on mobile landscape, but we didn't make the change on mobile portrait. So if we go to mobile portrait, size is now amber. If we click that, we see not only do we have an icon for mobile landscape, but we know it's inheriting not just from mobile landscape, but it's getting that styling from big hero heading, from this class on mobile landscape. So if we want to override that, if we made it 28, now it turns blue because we made a change on this breakpoint on this style. So let's undo, so it goes back to 29. Any changes we want to make here?
No, it looks good.
All right, so let's check everything. Let's go back to the base breakpoint and let's go into preview mode. Preview mode hides all of the interface and just exposes the site. It looks exactly how it'll look on the published site, on the main.com once it's published. So this of course is our base breakpoint. Let's go to the edge, click and drag, and take a look as we reflow through each of these breakpoints. So it is fluid and responsive. Notice here, right when we hit mobile landscape, we get that gradient style we added so that the contrast is a little greater between the text and the background, and all the way down to mobile portrait. Back up to the base breakpoint, and we're automatically back in the base breakpoint. But that's the hero section. What about the navbar? Well, with the navbar, we could build something from scratch here, but in this case, where we started with the section from scratch, let's use a starting point. So if we scroll down here, we can go down to components. Let's drag in a navbar. And it's still built using plain HTML and CSS. And if we go into drag that into the body, you can see it pushes down the section. That might be what we want for now. Later, we can decide if we want it to overlap or even scroll persistently through the website with sticky navigation. So we could always explore that later. For now, let's do a few things. Let's open up our navbar and take a look inside because we have three primary components. The navbar by default is going to come with a container inside. And again, the three elements. This is brand. This is where we can put our logo. This is the nav menu, which contains all of our nav links. And of course, the menu button, which we can't see. Why can't we see it? Well, we're on desktop, and later we can go to tablet and actually see where the menu button is. And that will, of course, trigger a menu on click. So we'll configure all this. We'll customize all of it. Let's go back to the base breakpoint. So to get started, let's select our navbar. And let's take a look at the container. First off, the width is not the same. We know we already created a container class down here. In fact, it automatically created a container class called container. That was the default. And we can just select our container up here. Notice how it doesn't have a class added yet. We could create a new one. We could set this to 1200 pixels, create container 2 or nav container. We can make it separate, but there's no real reason to yet. Let's go and add the correct class. We'll click in here and we'll just start typing container. And there it is. We can just click, and now instantly it's matched. In fact, the edge of this navbar right here aligns perfectly to the edges inside here, and that's because the container is identical. So if we make a change to the max width, in fact, with classes, it doesn't matter which element is selected. We're affecting the class. So we can just adjust that max width. Notice how it's adjusting on both at once. Undo to put that back to 1200.
Looks great so far.
Just to clarify, were you saying it looks gray so far or it looks great so far?
I said it looks great so far.
No idea. So how do we change this? Well, let's do the elements first. Agreed that it does look gray so far and it looks great so far. But let's style in a moment because for right now, let's add our brand block. Let's go in and go to assets. Let's just drag in Carbeek. This is the SVG file. This is the Carbeek logo. And we can drag it right into this brand block. Now, with an SVG, we don't have any data in this SVG. It's not reading any specific size here. So let's actually close this out. We could change the width and height here, but just to make sure we're using classes properly, let's, instead of styling first, let's name this class. So with this image selected, let's call this logo. And now it's a class called logo. And we can set a custom width, let's say 300 pixels. That's maybe a little too large. We could just hold down Option and drag, make it a little bit smaller, and maybe center it. That looks okay. Maybe add some top margin right here just to eyeball it. We can always go back and make this more specific later. Maybe 10. That looks okay for now. And right now we can't really see, there's not a lot of contrast between that color. And we could do the same thing here. We could style our nav links. So let's actually skip adding a class and see what happens when we switch the color. Let's choose red. No, that doesn't work. Let's choose that lighter color. What did we choose before? Was it F6, F6, F6?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that. Now we can see that affects this nav link. Let's delete the others. So that we take the one that has the nav link class applied and let's copy and paste it. Now let's reference Figma. We have 3, we have features, famous company logos, and sign up. Let's do that. Features, you know what? Let's stop and go to the nav bar and change this background color so we can see what we're doing. Is black the right color for this background or you want a dark gray? Looks like black, right?
Let's do black. Yeah, I like that.
And then where were we? Features, famous company logos, and of course,
sign up.
Sign up. Okay, so a few things to note. 1, because we already copied and pasted, we deleted all of the nav links except for the original one that we created that style on, the nav link class. When we copied and pasted, notice how the nav link class is now applied to all of them. So if we change 1, let's change the size. Notice if we change 1, it changes all of them. Maybe in this case, we want to do, actually 16 might not be a bad color. In fact, we can sometimes add values in CSS and realize we don't need to do it. We could just hit, something else, click away. Something to note here, when we change values and we want to revert values in CSS, sometimes we might want to just hit undo. That's fine, but so we don't have to keep track of things. We can also go in and reset. So if we go in and click this blue indicator, again, the blue indicator means we've made a change on this breakpoint on this specific class, navlink. Well, if we want to reset it, just click that label and press reset. Or we can hold down Option and click the label. And that reverts it back. Now that size is being inherited from the body. We know that by now. This might be good as is. How are you feeling about the navbar so far?
It's not gray anymore, but let's style this.
You saying it's not great anymore, or are you saying it's not gray anymore?
No, now I said it's not gray, because it's actually darker than that.
Darker than that? It is. It's black. It is, let's see, black. Yes, it says black. We could, if you'd like it to be just a very dark gray, we could do 020202. Now it's a dark gray.
No, let's do black.
Okay, undo and back to black.
All right, so there is another styling on the sign up button.
Okay, good call. So we have this kind of, it's not the greatest button in the history of time, but let's just go for it. Let's just copy that color and we'll go back to Webflow. Here's where we can use, and we can demonstrate the use of a combo class. So Could we change this to blue? What happens if we change it to blue? Let's just paste in, hit return. Now everything turns to that color. That's not quite what we want. So let's actually remove that color. We'll just reset that. Because what we want is we still want all of the settings from each of these. We want this color inherited. We want these to be consistent, but we want the sign up button to have something extra. We want it to be a little different and have something extra. So next to nav link, we can just click, and you can see a blinking cursor here, and now we can create a combo class. So let's just type button. So now the class selection is navlink button. So if we go in now and change that color, it's just affecting that. Now, how is that working? What does this mean? Is it separated completely? What happens if we make a change on something else? Well, let's see. There were several questions in that line, and no might have addressed some of them, and therefore might be correct. But let's select famous company logos, or this one, and let's change the size. Notice how sign up is still changing size. It's still inheriting those styles, but where we made a more specific styling, so where we changed the color, where that blue label is, of course it is overriding the other values. So that is a combo class, navlink button. Another thing we have in Figma is you have some space on the top and bottom there. That's okay, we can do the same thing in Webflow. A number of ways to do that. One way is we could actually just decrease, we could just eyeball this and decrease some of that space inside. So whereas it was 20 on the top and bottom before, we could decrease it by about, let's say 5 on both sides or even 10 on both sides. And just add margin on the top. So we're getting that space on the top, adding 10 back to the top. So we have that sort of spacing working. That looks good here. In fact, what does that look like if we go to, let's not use preview. Let's actually just click and drag right here in the designer. Notice how everything moves accordingly. That container is keeping everything neatly grouped.
Looks great.
It does, but one thing to note, the space here on the left and right by default is 20 pixels there and 20 pixels here. It does look like the space between features and famous logos is 40 pixels then, which means we might want to click sign up and add margin on the left. So it is 20 more. What do you think?
Yeah.
All right. So spacing looks good. What do you think about that color?
I think we can actually match like the bottles on the hero.
So, okay, just thinking outside the box, what if we select image and gradient, go to choose image, let's choose the hero image. Wait. Center it. Make it cover. Hang on. Honestly, there was half an idea here. Let's delete that. So you want to color select this, or do you want to do a gradient, or what's your preference here? So we're just clicking the color selection tool, and we can go over, example, that's yellow. It's a little bright. Maybe the pink color.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Want to try the pink color for now?
We can always come back to this later though.
Okay, great point. So that's the base breakpoint. Now, if we check tablet, it might look good, right? In fact, it does. By default, it looks pretty good. And if we go to mobile landscape and mobile portrait, we know we already styled the container in each of those, so we know that everything's going to respect those same boundaries we created before. So the container, everything is going to be even and matched, and that's pretty good. So if we go on tablet, let's actually see what happens. We can click our menu button. Let's go into element settings. So with our menu button, not the little icon, but the menu button selected, let's go to element settings. We have a bunch of options here for how we control those navbar settings, because by default, if we go into preview mode and we click this, it's not quite right yet. So let's click out of here, and with the element settings selected, with this menu button and the element settings, let's go to show. We want to show our menu. And that'll toggle open that menu so we can see everything inside. And we can do this one by one. We can maybe start with the menu button itself. So let's make sure the menu button's selected. Let's go back to the style panel, and we can start styling. Now, when it's selected, do we want the background to change in color? Do we want it to be a dark gray? Or do we also want it to be black?
Let's do a dark gray.
All right, so color, let's choose sort of a dark gray color, something like 1F, 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 1F. And let's keep this dark gray color in case we need it for anything. Let's add, we'll call this dark gray, and we'll hit create. And that way we can reuse some of our colors. We're creating swatches we can reuse universally throughout our project. And when we change that swatch on one instance, of course, it'll update all instances. Another example of how to keep things neat and consistent. So that's dark gray. And then for the nav menu, let's select the nav menu itself. Right now it has this kind of hideous light gray. We could choose that same dark gray there, or we could do black. What's your preference?
Same dark gray.
Same dark gray, okay. So that's looking pretty good. What's going on with sign up? Why is sign up like this? Well, we made a number of changes back in the base breakpoint. In fact, we know we made the change to mess with the margin on the top. So we can zero that out. We can just click in and zero that out. We know we changed that padding from 20 to 10. Let's change it back to 20 so it matches with the others. Holding down Option or Alt to adjust both sides at once. And of course, we added 20 pixels of margin on the left. So that's why there's that awkward gap. So let's just click in there, zero that out. Now, it's a design preference. Do we want to keep everything else pink here? Do we want to keep that pink color, or do we want to revert it? Your choice, Ada. What do you think?
I think we should keep it.
Keep it pink.
Yes, keep it pink.
So that's looking pretty good. So as we click and drag, we can see what that kind of toggled menu button looks like. Let's go to Mobile Landscape. Let's go to Mobile Portrait, and it's looking really good.
It's really good. The only thing here is that the Carbic logo is a little bit big.
Okay, so on Mobile Portrait, or even on all of these, or do you think just Mobile Landscape, Mobile Portrait?
So the Mobile Landscape and down.
Okay, so let's turn on hide. Let's actually turn off the menu button, and we can click this. Now, it might be tempting to go in here and say, let's change the width. That would be changing it on the element itself. We want to use the style panel. In the style panel, let's change the width. Let's say to, 120, something like that. Add some more margin on the top.
Okay, so one thing to know here is that it looks like there is a little bit extra spacing on the logo there.
This one right here?
Yeah, if you go in. Yes.
Looks like, okay, so here's what we got. So the navbar by default is going to add some padding, some space on the inside of this brand. Let's make sure to turn that off. So we're going to click and zero that out. And let's check now. So if let's hit escape to deselect, see how that looks. And on Mobile Portrait,
that looks good.
Perfect alignment. So let's check all of this at once. Let's go back to the base breakpoint. Let's turn on preview mode. Let's go to the edge and click and drag. And we'll see, of course, when we hit the tablet, right there, we see right there is when it hits that breakpoint. And we'll continue as it gets narrower. We, of course, see it works perfectly. Let's go to the tablet and click, see what that menu bar looks like. Toggle. Of course, we can go into the smaller views, all the way down, deselect, and back out again.
Looks great.
All right, so that's two major sections down. We did the hero section, we did the navbar. Let's move on, of course, to our product sections, the next area. Now, why didn't we break these down into three discrete chunks in terms of the numbers on the screen? Well, because we're actually going to be using classes to our advantage here. We're going to design one of them, then we're going to reuse almost everything in the other two. It's going to save us a lot of time, and it's going to let us design really quickly.
Both of those mean the same thing.
That's accurate. Okay. Yeah. So let's add another section. So let's look at in fact, we can just sort of collapse everything right now. So we see the nav bar on the top, the hero section under that, and of course, let's add a section under that. So we'll click and drag section. And of course, we want this underneath the hero section. So by default, a section, we can see it on the screen, but it really has no height, no width, it has nothing. It's just an empty box. If we click preview, of course, there is nothing to see. So let's go out of preview mode and start adding our elements. Let's use similar parts to what we used before. So let's use a container here. Let's go to container, let's drag it in. And so now we have our container. We already created a container class. We did this before. So let's use that container class, make sure we're applying that. We'll just click into container. So of course it has the same matched width. Now notice what just happened. Everything collapsed. It's really thin. The container, just like a section, doesn't have height, doesn't have any value until you put something inside the container. So let's do exactly that. Figma. Let's see what our sections look like. So we have three. We'll design the first one. We have fizz at the press of a button. This is centered. So hierarchically, we can see this is our section, this sort of full width area, and then in here is our container. We just need content inside. So two major pieces of content. We have the text down here, that's two elements, and of course the image up here. Let's go back to Webflow and do exactly that. Let's grab our image, so we'll go to images, and this is fizz at the press of a button. Let's click and drag, and we'll use the navigator here to place it perfectly in the container. And now instantly, let's close that for a moment. Instantly, we see our product image. See our product photography from that top view. That's the first half. The second is the text underneath that. So we can size this in a moment because it's a lot larger than when we designed in Figma. We can take care of that in a moment. Let's get the elements on the page first. We also have a heading. Let's drag that in. Of course, we want to place that under the image. We can do that right here. We'll style this a little bit later. We want to make sure the heading type in terms of element hierarchy, in terms of text hierarchy, heading hierarchy on the page. We want the main statement on the page, of course, to be our H1. It's usually the biggest, the most bold. It's the main statement on the page. That's the H1. Each of our subsequent sections, the title for each of those sections or the heading for each of those, that's going to be our H2, our second level heading. So let's switch this now to H2. And let's grab the content. Let's go back over here, fizz at the press of a button, copy, and of course, paste. Well done. And under that, we have a paragraph. Let's go to the add panel and grab a paragraph. Let's drag it right under fizz at the press of a button. We can do this right on the canvas. And of course, there is our paragraph. Right now it's lorem ipsum, filler text. Let's also grab the paragraph here. Back to Webflow, paste. All right, so we're getting there. Now let's do our styling. Let's do our layout and our styling, starting of course with the layout. With the section selected, we have no class added right now. Could we use our hero section? We could just go in here and use hero section. Sure, but we're inheriting, a ton of style information there. Let's undo that because we're gonna create a new section. Let's click in, let's call it just section. And with this, let's add padding, Option or Alt, click and drag, add padding on the top and bottom. Maybe 100 pixels, what do you think, Sarah?
100 works. 100 might be a little bit much, but we can always go back to this later.
Just in case, let's do 80 for right now. And then for the image, let's set a limit. So previously we had in Figma, you just select all three of these and the total width is, let's group, right click, and of course go to group selection. The total width is 760. We can match that in Webflow. Let's click with this image selected. Let's set the maximum width to 760. Now watch what happens. It's 760%, that's huge. It's not a great look, and it creates a lot of sideways scroll on the page. Not ideal. So we could do 760 pixels. Of course, we just converted to pixels, so let's go back and type 760 pixels, and there is our limit. That's a lot better. But there's a problem here. Everything is sort of pushed to the left. Everything is left aligned. Well, that's the default. Whether you're using Microsoft Word, HTML, everything starts on the top left and goes to the bottom right as you continue to populate your page. So how can we override that? Well, let's add another combo class. Let's use this on our container. So with our container selected, let's go to the right and type centered. It doesn't matter what you name that combo class, especially as you get more complex in your sites and your projects. It can get a lot more complicated if you're not using a scalable naming system. In fact, with container centered, we're going to inherit all of those container properties, but we can now override them. So let's override them with Flexbox. When we click Flex, so this is our default block display, we can go to Flex. Everything looks sort of not great. The direction
it's a little bit janky.
It is, that is the word.
Yeah.
And that's because everything by default in Flex is horizontal. Let's just switch that to vertical. Not great yet, but we're almost there. We're literally one click from getting where we want. This is where we can unlock all of our alignment controls. So let's go and choose center, or we could choose right. Notice how the elements are aligning with our setting right here. So let's make sure that's centered. And of course, with the centered container, we can also go down and affect the typography. Let's center the children. And that's looking pretty good. That's a centered section. Now, something to note back in Figma, we sort of set a maximum width of what, 409, about 500 pixels on the paragraph itself. We could do that back in Webflow too. We could do it on the paragraph, or to keep everything neatly organized, we can use a div block. And a div block is whatever you want it to be. In fact, a lot of these things we've been adding are essentially div blocks. A section is a div block, a container is a div block. These are containers. These are things that can hold other elements, and you can set rules, styles on that div block. So let's go in, grab a div block, drag it anywhere we want. Doesn't matter. Let's just put it in between these two for right now. Again, it doesn't have any properties on it. Let's drag fizz at the press of a button inside that div block, and let's drag the paragraph inside that div block. Let's look at our hierarchy. We have a section. In that section, we have a container. Keeps everything neatly bound towards the center. We have the image, and of course, we have that div block we just added. Let's name that div block. Let's create a class. Let's call it wrapper. And now is where we can set our limit. Let's set our width, our maximum width. The reason we're setting maximum width, let's use an example real quick. If we use width, let's just say 600 pixels. That looks great here. It's actually constraining everything like we'd expect. But if we go to mobile landscape, notice how it's hanging over the edge, or even mobile portrait. It's totally hanging over the edge. Not an ideal experience. So the reason we're using maximum, let's undo, let's actually click in, reset this so it goes back to auto. The reason we're using maximum width is when we add maximum width, same thing, let's do 500 pixels this time, is because we can now reflow when we go to mobile landscape or mobile portrait. Notice how it reflows perfectly. It's fully responsive, but it'll never get wider than 500 pixels. That's why we use maximum width. So let's set it to 500 pixels. How does that look?
That looks good.
Okay,
Yeah.
then
But I would
heading
not
2, are you talking about the
exactly
same thing? Yeah.
styling.
All right, let's style that. So we have a big hero heading. We could apply the same big hero heading to this, just reuse. Of course, we know with classes you can change one, it changes all of them, but that's not quite what we're after here. What we're after is something different. So could we create a combo class? Could we create big hero heading smaller? Yeah, we could. Or we can use this as a partially contrived example of when we should use duplicate. So duplicate works similarly. Duplicate will let us create a new class based on everything here. So we could call this smaller heading. And now we can make a change, just like you would in maybe a combo class. But here's the difference. Because we created a duplicate, it's no longer looking to the original big hero heading. So if we change something like the color, notice how it is not affecting the smaller heading. And that's because the moment you duplicate something, you're breaking it away from the original class. It's now a completely and entirely different class. It inherited all those styles, but only once, only at that moment. It's never going to go back and respect those styles from the original class. So that's duplication. This is a smaller heading. Let's do, what do you think, 32?
That looks good.
Okay, so that's 32. How about that 15 pixels? So we inherited that when we chose big hero heading and we duplicated that. Of course, our smaller heading also inherited that 15 pixels of spacing, but that's the first product section. How do we move on from the first one to the second one? Well, of course, we're going to do this from scratch. We're going to go to the add panel. We're going to drag a new section, except we won't do any of this at all because we can copy and paste. And with that comes all of our classes. Copy, paste. Do we see anything? No, but if we scroll down, we now have two identical sections. But here's the magic. If we make a change on something like the smaller heading, because we use that class, it affects both of them. If we select our image with that image class, we should really call this product image, and we change either of those product images, maybe we want the maximum width to be only, let's say 700. It changes both of them and it keeps everything neat and consistent. So this is the second one. Let's grab the copy from that one. Keeps your seltzer cold. Into Chrome, keeps your seltzer cold. From Figma, copy.
And paste.
And paste. All right, so let's replace this image. We can go into the cog and go to replace image.
And it is the middle one.
The base station. That's looking pretty good. Now, there is something to note here. This particular product image in this container, notice how it's spaced away from this. It's actually not bad, but it's not super clear if we were to differentiate these sections, because in Figma, let's recap. We in Figma created some type of differentiation here. Let's click our higher fidelity. Let's click this frame and turn off that column view. We did create this alternating kind of dark gray black layout. It's not the most beautiful thing in the world. If we wanted to differentiate though, so let's, for the sake of example, let's select any of our product sections and do a gradient, just so we can see the differentiation. Let's change this second stop to sort of a dark gray. Couple things to notice right away. The first thing is that this is a black background and we're not seeing that, we're kind of seeing that edge, that boundary. In fact, let's make that a little bit brighter so we can see that more clearly. Let's go in here and increase. You can see that black edge. So how do we fix that? Well, with our product image, any of these selected, we could go down and choose a blending mode. We could use blending here. So let's choose blending. Let's choose screen. So that's looking okay. It's looking a little washed out. This would only work if we kept the background pretty dark. So let's change this to kind of a dark gray. So we're seeing that differentiation between the sections. That looks okay. But the problem here is the top is very clearly cut off. Now that's a design choice. We chose here that we want to see the top of it, but we want that pushed right against the edge. How do we do that in Webflow?
Negative margin.
We could use negative margin. That's a great point. So we could, on the product image itself, we could say create negative margin. We could also just, let's undo that. We could also just decrease or reduce the padding in the section itself to 0. It's a little tight here. So why don't we undo, and on this particular product image, let's create a combo class. We can say negative margin. So we're creating a combo class for our product image, and it only affects this one because we don't have negative margin applied to this one. Let's go to our product image with negative margin and set it to, we know it's going to be negative 80 to offset that difference. And now notice how everything moved up. That's how negative margin works. You can actually subtract it so it goes into previous sections. It'll go over the hero section. What's up?
I don't know. Like, where did it go?
It's still on the page.
Yeah, okay. You have to scroll up then.
We'll scroll up then. All right, let's put that back to, well, negative 80. And that looks pretty good. So everything underneath that came with it. So that is our section. Inside the section, of course, we have the container, the product image with its negative margin pushed up perfectly against this. Smaller heading, paragraph inside the wrapper. This is looking pretty good. We might want to widen this a little bit, say 550 pixels. And again, because we're making a change on one of them, it's affecting both because they have the same class applied. So we're 2/3 done with this part of the section. Let's go to copy and paste one last time. There's something different here. There's something different because this is a different asset we created, which we exported before. So what we want to do is we want to import our JSON file. So let's go to assets. We can hit upload, or we can just drag in. We have this off screen. We can drag in that car beak animation, that JSON file. We can add it right to our asset manager. Let's let go. And that uploaded straight to our assets. Why can't we see anything else? Well, right now we're seeing that selection of Lottie assets. We can always go back to all assets and we still see that JSON right there. Now notice what happens even in the thumbnail here. If we hover over, we can start seeing that animation loop. But we can do more with that. We can actually drag it right into our project, just as we would any other asset, any other element. Let's drag it in our container. And let's close. We'll control the settings a little bit later. Let's scroll down right now. It's a little large. Why don't we steal the same? Let's delete this product image because we don't need two. Why don't we steal the same settings we used from here, the product image, and apply that here? Let's just go and add our class product image. We can use the keyboard down and return to select that existing class. And just like that, watch what happens when we go into preview mode. We see the animation play in real time. Now that's a great start. It's not exactly what we want. We want more than this, of course. So let's go out. Let's do a few things. We might want to, with that negative margin, that might actually look better here. Same type of thing with a little bit less space. And we want to control a couple things here. We want to control not only how fast or how the animation progresses, but we want to control its relationship to the scroll position on the page. So how can we do that? Well, we can use Webflow Interactions.
Interactions.
So both the N and the S had extended.
Yeah.
All right, so let's do it. So with our product image selected, we want to control what happens as we scroll through the page. So what we could do is, with the product image selected, go to Interactions up here, Interactions. And there are two types of triggers. Of course, an interaction is based on the concept that you have a trigger. That's something that triggers something like a click or a hover or a scroll. And of course, you have an animation. That's the thing that results from that trigger. So we have two types of triggers. Element triggers, like mousing over something in terms of hover, clicking. When you scroll something into view, when something is scrolling in view, we can play with all of these. But we also have page triggers. Page triggers don't apply to a specific element. They apply to something on the page, like the page actually loading. In this case, we want an element trigger. Of course, we want this while this element, this product image, is actually scrolling in view when it's visible. So let's click that. Now, on scroll, what action do we want to take? Well, we want it to play a scroll animation. What kind of animation? Well, we're going to be defining our own in just a second. But before we do that, look at these two boundaries. We want to know when is 0%, the animation at 0%. When we start that animation, where do we want this? Well, we want it at 0% when the element starts entering our view. That will be right here. The element just starts entering. So we want the animation to start playing there. So we'll use 0%. 100% is when the element is fully invisible. That'll mean once we've scrolled way past it and it goes away. Maybe 100% is a little too much. We could just select instead when it starts exiting. So when the element starts entering our view, it'll start animating. And when it starts exiting, so right about here, when it starts, that would be right when it hits the top here, we want the animation to be fully complete. We want the bottle top to be open. So how do we now then map that to an animation? Let's go in and create a scroll animation right here. Let's click Create, and let's call it Bottle Open. And we have a timeline here. So we have 0%. This is when we started, when it starts scrolling into view. And of course, this is when it ends, when it hits the top of the screen, when it starts to scroll out of view. So we can just say at 0%, let's start. And what kind of action do we want to add here? Well, we want one that controls Lottie. That's right. So let's choose Lottie. And we can kind of toggle here. We can start it at any point we want. We want it to start at 0%. That's the beginning of the animation. And we also need to set a point at the end. So let's select at 100%. It's already created that for us. We want that animation to be fully complete. Now, it's completely invisible. What happened at 100%? Why don't we see that 91st frame? Well, if you've used a nonlinear editor before, a video editor like Premiere or Final Cut or even iMovie, you move that playhead position to the absolute end. There is no frame after that. So at 100%, you're right at that point after that last frame. So one way to correct this, one quick way to correct this is to just do what we're going to do in a moment. But another way to correct this is to add another frame and then set your out point in After Effects to 1 frame before that. So that's one way to do that. But there's an easier way. We can literally just type 99, or really 99.9. Really anything below 100%, we're going to see it right there. So we'll just use 99.9%. And just like that, we created this animation, but we can't see anything. If we scroll, we don't have any result. Let's turn live preview on. So we're just gonna switch that on. And now as we scroll, let's see what happens. Well, now we're seeing the animation. As we scroll down, notice how the lid is lifting off and the animation is progressing. And it hits 100%. Look at the 82%. That'll hit 100 the moment this hits the top. So right there, it hit 100. Again, we see it's at 0% and it starts scrolling right when it starts entering view, right here. We can see it's starting to scroll. In fact, we might not, with this animation, we might not actually see anything. We might not see a result until we get about here. So that's what, 32%, about a third of the way down. We could move our first action. We could just click and drag and move it to, let's say, 35%. So what happens there? Well, it means that the animation, let's turn live preview on again. As we scroll, the animation is not actually starting. We're seeing the playhead position advance, but the animation itself, what we built, it doesn't hit that 0%, that frame movement, until we hit 35. Now the lid lifts off, and we get a lot more visibility into the earlier parts of that animation that we composed in Cinema 4D and After Effects. So we're seeing that beautiful effect just like this. In fact, if we want to get rid of all of the UI, of course, we could go right into preview mode. Let's scroll back out of view and then scroll down, and we can see that animation in real time, along with that ripple as well. In fact, we can just pinch in and scroll, and we can see the animation is progressing as we scroll. Let's zoom back out and leave preview mode. Let's press save, and we can go back to the style panel and continue working on layout. One thing we didn't do is actually change the content, so let's do that real quick. Let's go to Figma. We want the last one to be ultra lightweight, ultraviolet. Let's copy, back to Webflow, paste. Copy from Figma, back to Webflow,
and paste.
And paste. We got it. Now, one thing to note, we did give this a lot of headroom. I'm wondering if it makes sense to create another combo class called extreme negative margin. And just kind of pop this way up so it's just a little more reasonable, like 200. So that way, if we go here, just a little more in line with what we were used to before. And you get that nice cross boundary right there where you see the kind of glare kind of shows up over the other stuff. What do you think about that?
I like that.
Okay.
That looks really good. But what about the wrapper? It looks like in the Figma we have the text wrapper above the bottle.
Absolutely. It's kind of it's overlaying here. In fact, we're actually almost clipping off towards the bottom, or at least there's this idea of overlay. Okay, so back in Webflow, we can go to wrapper. We can create another combo class here. So for wrapper, we can create one called negative margin, and that will now affect anything that has wrapper and negative margin appended to that. So we can actually overlap like this. But one thing to note, this might be deceptive. This might actually be screen doing the work for us, because if we select our product image again, we know that our product images are using screen, that blending mode. If we actually just temporarily switch this off, we can see, yeah, that is actually being covered. It's deceptive because screen is exposing the stuff behind it because this is a pretty dark animation. But let's undo that real quick. We want to really make sure this text is selectable. If we click in here, we can't actually select it. Notice how it's blocked. We could select this, it's fully accessible, but this is blocked. How do we bring the text, or how do we bring that wrapper in front? Well, there's a few ways to do it. One quick way to do this is to select anything. So let's go over here. If we're ever blocked, if we can't click something in the canvas, we can always go to the navigator. So let's select the wrapper. And to bring it in front, we can use any of our advanced positioning controls. Let's go from static and change it to relative. Relative position is super powerful. You can use it to move something relative to its original position. So that means if you want to move it up and down, you can. If you want to move it left and right, we'll undo. But notice how if we now select the product image and we change our blending mode, it doesn't matter. The text is in front. And more importantly, besides the aesthetics, if we go to the preview mode and we click and drag, we can now select that text. So what just happened? Why can we now suddenly select it and see it above the animation? Well, the reason is the wrapper was switched to relative. And by default, when we add relative position on something, not only does it move it in front, but it exposes something called z-index. And if you haven't used z-index, it's super powerful. It's how we control on the web. If we have several overlapping elements and they're all kind of intersecting with each other, z-index controls which items stack in front of others. In other words, it's stacking order. A higher z-index value will mean it stacks on top of something with a lower z-index value. So if you have 3 items next to each other, 1, 2, and 3 being their z-index values, the one that's 3 will stack on top of 2. The one that's 2 will stack on top of 1. You want the one that's number 1 to stack on top of 2 and 3? We'll just make that number 4. The higher the number, the higher it sits in the stacking order. So that is creating sort of an overlap here. Let's go back and really optimize that. Let's make sure it's 261, maybe 250. It's pretty legible as long as we're avoiding maybe 260 right here. Let's go into preview mode. Got that nice overlap now. What do you think?
That looks great. One question though, why didn't you change the order in the navigator?
Okay, so good note. You're wondering why the wrapper, we just didn't flip wrapper and product image. A couple of reasons. The way that we have the margin set up, it would actually just change the ordering of everything. So if we had switched, let's just say it was back to when it didn't have negative margin, we would have put this on top, and that kind of breaks the pattern that we had before of product image, wrapper, and now it's, wrapper followed by product image. How many times do you want to undo?
2.
Oh, good guess.
Yes.
Well done.
Let's move on to responsiveness.
Good call. Let's make this all responsive. So if this is desktop, let's actually go in. We just grab the edges here and should be fine here, but let's see what it looks like as we kind of get a little more narrow. That looks good. Tablet, what are we looking like here? It actually looks good on tablet already. Let's scroll through. What do you think? Anything that needs to, well, maybe the heading here, because we decrease the size of the bigger heading, maybe decrease these a little bit.
And maybe also decrease the paragraph a little bit.
Okay, so one note here, we have a paragraph style, a paragraph class applied to this one. We did not apply it to any of these. So what do? Do we go to our body and kind of override it there? That's going to affect everything. There is a trick here, and that is, of course, we learned earlier about text inheritance, how parents can control the text styling on their children. We could just select any of these sections because each of these sections have the same section class applied. We could just decrease the font size there. Just decrease it to, let's say, 14.
14 looks good.
14. Now, why did that work? How is 14 conflicting with the body? In other words, how is this whole text inheritance thing set up now? Well, let's take a look. We know that this paragraph is now inheriting not from the body, it's inheriting from the section because we just changed it on the section. But if we'd removed it, it looks up the hierarchy for the first text element where there is a change. If it doesn't find that, it's going to go all the way to the body. If the body doesn't have anything set, it'll go to the HTML. It'll respect the browser's font size preferences. So what we're doing is on a more specific, on the children, the section, of course, being a child of the body, we're setting a more specific styling. We're saying on the section itself, we're saying make the size 14 pixels for the font. And of course, the paragraph is listening to that. Why is the heading not 14 pixels? Well, because we set a more specific style on that heading. Text inheritance is super powerful. It's why everyone on the web, everyone building professionally for the web is using text inheritance, is using styles, is using classes like this. Super, super powerful. Okay, so now we have that consistent look. What else do you think on tablet? Just out of curiosity, before we go down to tablet, back on desktop, is the spacing, is kind of the white space or the blank space enough on both of these? So we talked about 80 versus 100. Do we want to add maybe some more white space here?
Yeah, I still like the 100.
Okay, let's do 100. That means we will have to make a change here on the negative margin for the product image. Let's make that
negative 100.
100. Scroll down. That looks pretty good.
Yeah, that looks great.
Now down here, we did, on this product image, we moved it up quite a bit. We could actually add some extra, well, that's not going to work. The wrapper itself, we could do that. Add some extra margin at the bottom. So let's just add. So you can't see it, but if we scroll down, we're actually adding a ton of space down there. Just eyeballing, maybe 100 down there, just to give it some room to push off. How does that look?
I like that.
Okay.
And
so
how is it on tablet?
let's see. So on tablet, it actually looks pretty good. Spacing might be fine on tablet. Okay, over to mobile.
Mobile.
What's that?
How's mobile?
What?
Mobile.
Mobile. Oh, so like mobile, but the British pronunciation. There's a right way and a wrong way.
Yeah, and this is the way.
Okay, that's fair. Sorry, how do you say it again?
Mobile.
It's completely acceptable. That is
Let's do it.
that is a way to pronounce it. All right, so we're fine on here. Mobile landscape. Okay, what's happening here? Whoa, we're getting some overhang here. Let's see what's going on. Okay, so notice what happened here. We have our maximum width set to 700 pixels. We see if we can just scroll left and right. You can also hold shift if you have a scroll wheel and just scroll left and right. So we're seeing this product image definitely causing overhang. So on this smaller device, it's taking up too much room. So there's a couple reasons this might happen. We do have an issue now where all of our product images, because they're a maximum of 700, they don't know to constrain themselves. So we could just set a constraint that'll respect the width of the device. But if that's 700, how narrow? Let's just check. How narrow does it get on tablet? Let's scroll. Okay, we never actually get more narrow than 768, so that's safe. But starting here, let's check. Actually, let's just make sure. Okay, we're good there. Let's check mobile landscape. And instead of 700 pixels, let's say 100%. We never want it wider than 100% of the space that's available inside its parent. What is its parent? Well, we know its parent is the container. And the container has that padding on the left and right. We know the container here has padding of 20 on each side. So now the product image is 100%, but of course it's subtracting the 20 pixels on the left and right. So it's taking up 100% of the space that's left. Now we're still getting some overhang. What's going on over here? Let's keep looking. Well, this is product image right here. Okay, so good note here. This was product image with negative margin. This is product image with extreme negative margin. So we have a lot. Sometimes with class organization, we can go through this exercise of consolidating, figure out what we need, what we don't need. In this case, it should be pretty simple. Let's just set 100% on this and make sure we do the same with this one, 100%. And now we try to scroll. Nothing, no extraneous horizontal scroll. Everything is scaling. Look how responsive and beautiful that is.
I noticed that you put maximum width on all the product images.
Yes.
Why didn't you just do the first one?
Ooh, that's a good note. You're saying because those are the base styles. That is a fantastic note and a great way to talk about the consolidation we were talking about. So let's go in and remove. This is an excellent note. Okay, so let's reset. So we're doing that. And notice how when we reset it there, it didn't actually change anything. What? Why is that happening? Well, because we applied it to this one, the product image, as Sana just said, that's the base class product image. We know that a combo class builds on top of the base class. So now that we got rid of it, it's actually inheriting the maximum width from just plain old product image from the first one. Let's prove that real quick. If we say 50%, all of them are changing because this is the base class. Product image is the base class. Let's switch that back to 100. An extraordinary note that saved us not only code on the page, but saved us complexity. So if we change it in the future, we don't have to go and change all three manually. We can go right back to the base class. All right, how are we feeling about vertical sort of spacing and margin on all of these?
So I think we can decrease it to 50 top and bottom.
Okay, let's decrease to 50 top and bottom. We know that means we might have to do an override here on this one because that's negative 100, negative 50.
Perfect.
Scrolling down, that might be a little tight here, maybe negative 150 here.
Yeah.
And then do we want to move the wrapper a little, maybe like 240? Let's see how that looks as we resize. No matter the range, it's still legible against this. It's just illegible if it starts overlapping here or probably at the bottom as well. All right, mobile portrait, let's check that. So same thing here as we're scrolling, as we're kind of resizing, I have that same thing. Notice how in mobile landscape and in tablet, we've switched the regular paragraph to 14. Now it's matching this paragraph style, which was set by the section. Would you prefer that we make it even smaller, or is it okay that the hierarchy is the same here?
I think it's okay, the hierarchy is the same here. Okay. If you go below 14, it might be a little bit small for a full paragraph. It's okay for smaller content.
Like a label or something.
Exactly.
Okay. So we'll keep that at 14. So mobile portrait. Spacing is a little messed up here. So what do you think about maybe even going back here? This wasn't the greatest thing, and there's some ways that we can what if starting here on this extreme negative margin product image, what if we make a different change? What if we say, let's go to a little bit narrower so we can see what's going on here. What if we say that the maximum width is 80%? And what if instead of subtracting here, what if we just zero this out? And just take a look at what happens if we just let it sit on top. So we
I think that works.
Yeah, even
on phone.
Yeah, maybe negative 100 on the top. And then we're just kind of spacing things out. And that way we can kind of get that room back. We also have on the wrapper, we could just zero this out down here. So now we're kind of respecting that. And that's going to scale with the phone, with the mobile phone in landscape. And in portrait, it'll do the same thing. Maybe that's a little small. Go back to 100% here. And even get rid of some of that margin. Negative 50. Maybe somewhere in between. You could also make it a function of the width. You could make it negative 25 viewport width. So now it'll scale proportionally.
Yeah, that works.
I mean, it's a pretty complicated hack there. Viewport width, of course, is defined by the width of the browser, or the width of the viewport in the browser, whether you're on Chrome, Safari, Edge, Opera, Firefox, whatever you're using. So when we just did that, we said, hey, take whatever the width is of that device, whatever that is. So right here, it's 295 pixels. We can see that at the bottom. Or here, it's 341, whatever that is. Take that width and we're just setting that top margin as 25% of whatever that width is. That's 25 VW. In this case, we're making it negative. So we're subtracting, we're creating 25% of that value. That's why you see that the space there is proportionate. It's proportionate to the width of the display. That's a more advanced technique. There are several ways to do that. We can do that with JavaScript. We can do that with different CSS values. There are tons of ways to make this happen. That's just one. Again, completely optional. You could also just use pixels. That works. So that works for us. For this one, looking pretty good. What about the heading sizes, even in mobile portrait? What if we decrease these a little bit, or mobile landscape? What about 20 or something, or 22?
Let's do 22, and then let's check the portrait. Yeah, we can go lower than 22 here too.
What do you think of differentiating? Just one thing, just noting before, we actually did 75% opacity on these. So not wanting to lose your note here, you were saying potentially explore
20.
A smaller, well, there's 20 right there. And then even noticing this text block way up there, we can actually call this subheading just to keep things a little organized and maybe a little more space. 1.3, 1.4. But you were saying, let's just make all these changes right now. A little more spacing here, 1.2, just eyeballing this. So the Figma that we had this at 75%. And now it's at full F6, F6, F6. So if we go back here, back to the base breakpoint, we could just choose this paragraph style or go back to, our body. We could make the default a slightly lower opacity, so 75 or 80%, just 75. And that makes all of our text, since we don't have a more specific style, that's going to affect all of our text. So we could just select our big hero heading, make sure to go there and override full opacity. Maybe on the subheading, same deal, full opacity. And then on any of our smaller headings, we can make it 100%. And of course, when we affect one, we know it affects all of them. So full, actually it was F6, F6, F6. And that way we kind of have that differentiation now.
Good catch.
So let's go into preview mode. We'll grab the edge and check all of this and see how it scales across all our breakpoints. Let's do that here. Let's keep going down. These sections are looking great. All right, out of preview mode. Those are our 3 product sections. So what do we have left? Well,
we have the featured in, the form, and the footer.
We're over halfway done. Why? Because we secretly did 3 sections within 1 section. So we're slightly farther than 50%. So, of course, let's do our company logos, our featured in. We can do this pretty quickly. So we have a section. So let's actually collapse all these. Let's keep things organized. We already have an existing section. So let's drag that section in anywhere we want. We're just going to drag in a new section element. We have an existing section class. So let's use that section And it's here. We want a couple things in that. We can actually steal this smaller heading. Option drag to just duplicate. Let's drag it right into the section. We'll use our container in just a second. Let's get some of our elements on the page. We also want, you know what? Let's just do that right now. Let's get our container inside that section to keep everything neatly bound. Let's drag this in there just so everything's organized. And our container, we have that class container. And we'll probably want to center everything, so we can use that combo class. Just click to the right. We have centered right there. Looking good. So we only have one more thing to add. Well, we have 5 more things to add, 4 logos, plus the one more thing we initially talked about, which is
a grid.
A grid. So there's lots of ways to do this too. We could do this any number of ways, but a grid keeps things simple. And we'll talk about why in a moment. Grids are rows and columns. That's it. Really, grids are that simple. So we can define the number of rows and columns we want. For our design, for our Figma, if we reference here, we know we have sort of a 1 row and 4 column layout. So we can recreate that in Webflow. Let's just add 2 columns and we'll remove one of those rows. Let's press done. And it's a little narrow. We could do a few things here to get our grid looking however we want. So by default, the grid, if we go to alignment and order, the grid is only going to auto align. We could stretch it out here, so we could say stretch, and that'll automatically fill up the available space inside of that container. So why is it not filling up the container fully? Well, we know the container, again, has 40 pixels of padding on the left and right. But enough of that. Let's talk about the grid. Let's add our 4 logos. Sada, what are our 4 logos in that Figma order?
So we have a Bloomberg,
So
Gizmodo,
Bloomberg.
Real Simple, and Wired.
That was too fast. Gizmodo. What was the next one?
Real Simple.
Real Simple.
And Wired.
And Wired.
And I think we also need to change the heading here to be featured in.
Featured in. And how do we feel about that spacing?
It's a little bit tight.
So we could, if we want to, this is another choice we can make. We could create a combo class and add some more margin at the bottom, or we could just select our grid and add some more margin at the top. Just push that off, maybe 20 pixels there. So it's spaced out. How does that look? It's a lot better.
Yeah, looks good.
So that might be it. Now, one note, we'll do this when we revise a little bit later when we get everything ready for publish. But one note is that we want to make sure that all meaningful images, even if they look legible on the page, that they have alt text. That's important for accessibility. It's important for search performance. It's important for a lot of reasons. So we want to make sure that all inline images have alt text. We will make sure to cover that before we publish. And for right now, we could, of course, click on any of them and we could use custom descriptions here. We could define it as decorative, or we could go into our assets, which we'll do a little bit later, and make sure that alt text is added to all of them. So let's close that for now. That is it for our featured in section. Let's check, just to make sure, let's check here. It's actually looking really good on all of these. Maybe a little tight on mobile portrait here.
Yeah, maybe stack all of them on each other.
Like a 2 by 2. Okay, and just to demonstrate again, with our grid selected, we can go to Edit Grid right here, or we can go under Layout. With grid selected, we can go to Edit Grid. And what we'll do is we'll just delete 2 of the columns. And when we do, another auto row is generated. We don't have to add manual rows. So with CSS Grid, everything is going to neatly group. In fact, that's great. This looks pretty good as is. In fact, we might want to decrease the size of this a little bit. So we could, let's go into Edit Our Grid. And we could actually increase the gap in between these. So let's click and drag just to make sure hierarchically this text is a little bit smaller than that text. So we could just do that. So now it's still legible, but the spacing is a little better there. How do you feel about that?
I think we can increase the spacing on the rows as well.
Oh, good point. So we can go into Edit here and do that. We can do both at once. Hold down Shift and it'll affect row. Maybe we don't want as much there. Maybe a little bit more here. Like 40 pixels here. Maybe a little more to your point, maybe 25 pixels here.
Yeah, let's do that.
All right, and done. Little extra space up here under the container. The smaller heading, of course, is pushing off the top. It might not be super vertically balanced here. We could add 20 under the grid to offset that. So let's add 20. And now we have just as much space, or much more similar space, to the bottom like we do on the top. All right, so that section looks great. Let's test it. Let's go to preview mode. Let's go to the edge, click and drag. And of course, when we hit mobile portrait there, it resizes. Fully responsive. All right, we're almost done.
Almost done. 2 more sections.
All right, so we have our call to action. This is our form section, and this is one of the most important sections. Why? Well, because it's how people actually get in touch. It's how they reach out. It's how they learn more, and they're the first in line to figure out when they can get their hands on Carbeak. So let's do that. Let's create a new section. We're getting pretty good at this. In fact, in this case, we can go to section and just copy this last section, copy and paste. Now I have a section underneath. Right now it looks identical. Let's open that up and delete our grid because we don't need our grid in this case. And for featured in, let's name that.
It's almost here. Be among the first.
Be among the first. Copy. Google Chrome, paste. And of course, we have a paragraph. We have a paragraph to add under that. Let's go and click in and choose our paragraph. We'll drag that under. And let's go back in here. Copy.
And paste.
And paste. You know what we could do?
We can actually add a wrapper.
The wrapper, the same wrapper?
Yes.
The same div. Now, if you haven't heard of Quick Find, or you haven't used Quick Find before, or you're new to Webflow and you want to learn a quick way to add elements or to find stuff in your project, Quick Find is incredible. Command E to pull up Quick Find. We can just type div. Press return, and now we add a div. We can do Command E, heading. Now we have a heading. Command E, want a section. Can't do that. Section elements cannot be nested inside each other. Okay, let's really remove that heading. It's ridiculous, we don't need it. But we do have that div block. Let's call it wrapper because we already have that class. And that means if we drag this inside and drag this inside, we're now keeping everything contained like we keep these contained above. So we have that. And then of course we want to add one more thing. We want to add our form block. So with our container selected, because we want to add that form block inside the container, let's use our new shortcut, Command E, and we'll add a form block. We'll just type form, press return, and now we have a form. So we know the sort of rule about Flexbox is by default, the parent, the container, is going to keep everything neatly bound towards the center. It's going to keep things aligned center. But this child, so of course the form block is a child. It's a sibling element of the wrapper, but it's a child of that container. It doesn't know to expand to fill up that space. We have to tell that child to expand, to take up that space. So we'll go ahead and stretch. So with the form block selected, we'll go and set stretch. And maybe we want to set a maximum there. Do we have a realistic, maybe 600?
Yeah.
Okay. Notice how it's not fully centered. So we are coming up with a limit there. So we could choose between this, and sometimes that can get a little confusing. That's okay, because there's another way to do this. It's a quick fix. We could just, of course, set align to auto. In fact, we can remove that. We can reset that value and just set the width to 100%. So what just happened? When we set it to 100%, it's now going to take up all the available width until it hits 600 pixels. So now it works perfectly. Even if we go down here to, we're skipping ahead a little bit, go down to mobile portrait, it'll never get wider than 600, but because this is a lot less than 600, it's capping there. It's 100% of the space available with a maximum of 600 pixels. So this is looking good. Do we want the field labels there, or do we want them to the left?
I want them to the left.
Okay, so we can just, on the first one, we'll create a class for this. We'll go align left. Maybe bold is a little, you want medium?
Medium looks good.
Okay, maybe a little smaller, like 14. On this, we're just getting the first one right. We can always change this later. On the second field label, let's click here and make sure to apply that same style. And maybe the text field, let's do a little more space here. Maybe 20 pixels. Same thing down here. We styled the first one, so we created that text field automatically. We created that class when we styled the first one. Let's select the second one, and of course do text field. And now they both have the same margin. We change one, it changes both. We'll make that 20. And then our submit button. Where do we want the submit button? Full width?
Full width. No, let's have it to, yeah, let's have full width. Yes.
It's a bit heavy. We did in the design kind of a right. We never really got high
the
fidelity.
right one. Yeah.
You like the right align or do you like the full width?
I actually do like the right align a little bit more. And let's do it pink too.
Okay, that's good. So let's grab that brand color we had up here. Let's grab the brand color and let's add that. Let's add it as, it's called Orchid here. We'll just call it brand pink. And we'll apply that down here. So submit button selected. Let's make it brand pink. What do we want it to say? Submit.
Yeah.
Yeah, submit's fine. And we want it, you said, not full width. So let's actually decrease that size. And it's right there. We can select our form block. And of course, we can make it flexbox as well. Our form element, not the form block, the form element. So if we look in the form block, that's the overall container. But we want to choose the form element. Why? Because it's the parent of all of these children. So if we want to tell it what to do, we'll select the parent. So that's the form. Let's make that flex. It's a mess right now. We'll fix that by switching to vertical. And then in order to get this submit button to the right, we'll just select it. And under alignment controls, we can eyeball this. We can go left, middle, but what we want is right. And let's add some more padding just so it's a little bit clearer. Let's do 40 pixels on both sides. And if we want some more space, we could always add some margin on the top.
Perfect.
All right, nearly perfect. It's kind of a 16 pixel. It's a bit of an estimate, just eyeballing this. Okay, so that's our call to action. Let's go to tablet. Honestly, it looks pretty good on tablet. Mobile landscape, let's go back to tablet. Check here, that looks pretty good. Looks good on mobile landscape. You know what, a mobile portrait, what if we went full width, just because it's a little bit more narrow?
Yeah.
So let's go back. Oh, we're actually here. Let's go. I thought we were in preview mode, but we're not, so that's good. Let's set our width to 100%. And because it's on a more specific class, it's on mobile portrait, we don't have to worry about it affecting mobile landscape. Mobile landscape is still to the right. So that looks pretty good. All right. So that's looking good. One thing to check is what happens when we type in test text. That looks great. It's using enter, it's inheriting that. That looks pretty good. And let's go back out of preview mode. So we're back here, and that is our call to action. So one more to cross off. We're making huge progress because we only have one section left. It's the footer.
It's a footer.
So we know the drill by now. We're going to add one more section. We know that is the footer. Let's collapse everything so we can see the total hierarchy, the top level hierarchy under the body. And let's add a final section. Let's put that at the bottom. We'll call it footer. Let's reference our design here. And take a look. It's about as wide, so probably a container element here. So let's drag in a container. We know the drill by now. We're going to add our container class. And right now it collapsed because there's no content inside. Just like we used for the featured in, just like we used a grid here, let's use a grid down below as well. Let's drag grid into that container. We'll use the navigator here to place it perfectly. And it's editing the grid right now. It looks like probably a 4 column, although we know one of these is fake. So this is not real social. It's not double social. So maybe something closer to this. We can play with the sizing in Webflow. Maybe something where this is, what do you think, right? Justified like this? Mm-hmm. Or maybe a little more spaced out. What do you think, Sarah?
Yeah, I think the social can be a little bit closer to the address. There we go. Yes, that looks great.
Okay. So in Webflow, one note. We already created a grid before for these logos. It was a little 4x1 grid, and when we did that, it automatically created that class. Let's call that logos, and let's call this one
footer grid.
Footer grid. That's fine. Or just for consistency, we'll call this one logo grid. Okay. So what are we going to put in the footer grid? Well, we know we want to put, in fact, we can go all the way to the top and grab that logo, copy, go all the way to the bottom, and just select that grid and paste. That's it. First part, we got the logo. Second column. Now here's how a grid works. If we were to put things, like if we put a text block here and we just say, this is the, in fact, let's delete the text block. Let's create a heading here. If we just drag a heading into the grid, we can make it an H3, a third level heading, and we can say address, and we can add a little, maybe a text block underneath the address. Notice how it's just pushing things around. That's because a grid allows one element per cell by default. That's how a grid works. So if we want multiple things inside the second cell, we're going to use, you guessed it, a div block. And a div block will keep everything neatly organized. So let's drag a div block in. We'll call this grid cell. And we can drag the text block into the grid cell. So we'll just position it into the grid cell. Same thing with the heading. We'll make sure that's in the grid cell. And now notice how it's one grid cell, but two elements are inside. Let's flip that because the heading should go above that. And we can just decrease this. It's just almost all but eliminate that padding there. And then just decrease this heading. Let's call this footer label. Let's decrease the font size. In fact, should make this 1 hyphen. Decrease this to 16 or so. And maybe the text block also to, let's say 14. And then we can just paste the address. Copy.
And paste.
And paste is correct. Now, if we reference our Figma design again, we can go here, we see social. It's very similar in terms of that design. In fact, there's 2 changes to make. Let's make sure our address, let's select our footer label, and let's add back some of that spacing, maybe 15 pixels, just so we match our design here, even 20 pixels. So we can do 20 pixels at the bottom. And we want to copy all of this. So we could just copy and paste, but this is also a good time to demonstrate how we can hold down Option or Alt and just click and drag to duplicate. Notice how we're just holding down Option or Alt. We can move this anywhere we want. We want it over here. So we make a second grid cell. And because both of these have the same class, as we make a change like padding on the left, notice how it affects both of those grid cells. Let's undo and change this one. So let's go back to Figma for our reference. We have social. All right, so social. And then, of course, we have our links. Let's delete this. First off, let's name this. Let's say footer text. Let's call it footer text. And then let's actually delete this because we actually want to use links. So let's click and drag text link into our social, right under social in our grid cell. And by default, we have this link style. This is our default link style on the page. This may be the preference if we have a hyperlink. So what we could do here is we could add a simple class to it. We could also style using tags. We can style all our links if by default we want all our links to look a certain way. So with all links selected, we could go in and say, we want maybe a blue, or even what if our links had sort of a pink color? That could work. That's one way to do it. And we could actually leave it that way, so that's the default. But we could also override that or apply a more specific class by selecting the link and going to footer link. Let's create a class with specific styling. And maybe we want it to be white or even F6. By now, we use F6, F6, F6 so much that we should probably create a global swatch. We'll call it light, very light gray. And then one more, because we actually use the, what was it, the 75% opacity. We could actually go in here, add a new one, and call it secondary text color. Many ways to name these things. And that way we can just go in here and choose our secondary text color. Now, what just happened? By choosing that, thinking that we'd save time by adding a global swatch, we accidentally styled this. And when we styled it, it actually created paragraph 2. That was not the intention. So let's just remove paragraph 2. And that way we're not adding random classes, random extra classes to our project. And we can always clean those up over in the Style Manager. We could see all of our classes here and all of our tags because we've now styled all links. And we can clean up since we're not using that paragraph 2 style we just accidentally created. Let's clean it up and remove. So we're just cleaning up unused styles. But our point remains the same. We've created this sort of secondary text color. Now anytime we want to use that again, it can apply that. But the paragraph is still set manually. It's inheriting from the body. So could we, just to tidy up, could we go to the body and make sure that the body color is set? Looks the same, but now it's referencing that global swatch. Now, why? That seems like maybe a complicated step or an unnecessary step. Why do we have to make that change? Well, we don't have to. But now if we change, let's say, the secondary text color, we have that defined here, and we want to change our secondary text color everywhere. Well, now we can edit that swatch. We can say, let's make it red. And notice how it's doing that for all of the paragraphs, all of the things that we used that inherited that style from the body, but it's affecting the field labels. It's affecting the text links. And the reason it's doing that is anything that doesn't have a more specific style on it, it's overriding. And any of the things that are using secondary text color will now be affected by this change. This looks absolutely hideous. So let's change it back to white with 75% and save. All right. And
all right. So let's start with Instagram.
okay, Instagram. Instagram. Okay, and we can just copy and paste a bunch of times. So notice how these are stacking side by side right now. We know of a few ways to deal with this. We could say we want these to take up the full width, so we could just make them block level elements. So with footer link selected, let's make them block level. So now they stack like that. Let's label them first and style them later. We have, what is it, a total of 6?
We have Instagram, Dribble, Behance, LinkedIn, TikTok,
Hold on. That's
Twitter.
very, very quick reading.
Oh.
Can you spell them, please? Instagram, what's the next one?
Dribble. With
R-I-B-B-B-L-E.
Yeah.
3 B's, right?
3B.
Okay.
Behance. LinkedIn.
All right. Camel case, capital I.
Yes.
LinkedIn.
Perfect. TikTok and Twitter.
TikTok. And there's another one.
And lastly is Twitter.
Twitter. All right. So we have those. So how do we want to make them side by side?
Let's do grid within a grid.
Okay. Excellent, excellent, excellent point. We can go to our add panel and we can drag in a grid. Now, if we just try to drag, let's show an example here. If we try to drag a grid right in here, it's going to interpret this as trying to replace one of the grid cells. And that's not our intention. We actually want to place this into the third column. So let's undo that real quick, because we can go in with the add panel. We can hold down Command. Let's drag grid and hold down Command. And now when we do that, it lets us place within the children inside the grid. So we want this to actually be in this third grid cell. Let's just place it right here. And we want 2 columns, so let's remove the second row. So we have 2 columns here. And now we can sort of sort each of these inside our grid. So let's just drag Instagram, let's drag Dribble, or even just to make this more precise, we could just start placing these right in the grid like this. Just move all of our footer links right into the grid. And notice how it's going to sort them. Let's get all of these in first. And that's it, all 7 are in here. And of course we can resort these, we can reorganize them. But by default, look what's happened.
Wait. There's one extra link.
What's up?
We're only having 6 links.
No, you said perfect.
Well, remove that one.
Okay, so remove perfect. Now we have 6 links. And we can edit our grid style here. Let's make sure to select our grid, and we can call this link grid. And we can make some changes here. Let's go in and decrease maybe a little bit of that. So we have the spacing, maybe 4 pixels or 5 pixels. We can decrease there we go, undo that. We can decrease the spacing here, but that looks pretty good. Let's press done. And right now these are all underlined. We could of course remove that styling too. We can just, on decoration, with our footer link selected, we can just turn off decoration. Let's go back to our Figma for reference. They were a little bit closer. We could actually just remove that grid gap entirely. So let's just go inside. If it's hard to select here, we can always affect our grid gap, our column gap, our row gap. We'll just zero that out here. And that looks pretty good.
Yeah, I like it.
Okay, there's not enough space here though. Our footer is pretty tight in terms of, let's go to preview mode. You can see it's quite narrow. And that could be fixed a number of ways. Let's go and select, let's collapse this. And let's select our footer. And maybe add some padding on the top and bottom. Maybe, let's see what 100 pixels?
Yeah.
How does that look? Maybe a
Looks
little.
good.
You think so? As opposed to something
Smaller.
like 80?
Maybe 80.
Okay, what about 79?
No.
What about 79.5?
Let's do 80.
Okay, let's do 80 on the top, 80 on the bottom. Okay, so what happens when we go to tablet? Actually, so far so good. It seems to adapt nicely, responsively on tablet. Let's go back to mobile landscape. Now we're getting a little narrow here. So what's your preference starting with mobile landscape in terms of this sort of grid layout?
Yeah, just do like 1 column.
All right, 1 column. So let's select first off, let's open our footer. Let's go to that footer grid and let's go to edit that grid. We're going to remove, right now it's 3 columns. Let's make it 1 column. So here's what we have now. Let's press escape to look at it. Let's see how it responds. What's your thought here regarding how it looks?
Let's add some spacing between the rows.
Between the rows?
Yeah.
Of the parent grid here?
Yes.
Okay, so let's edit the grid and let's increase our row gap. Just hold down Option to drag. Just say when?
Well, that went fast. Less.
Okay.
Decrease. Poof. Let's do 40.
40. All right.
Yeah, I think that looks great.
Yeah, that's 40.
Yes.
Okay. How are we thinking about in terms of the kind of grid within a grid here? Do we want to modify that at all?
I think it looks fine on this breakpoint, but maybe change it to one column in mobile portrait.
So I think something to note here is the tap targets are going to be really, really small. So even on this first one, they're okay. But once we get on kind of a mobile device or a touch device, it's going to be a pretty narrow tap target. What do you think about on these footer links adding a little bit of padding so that we increase the size of that clickable area? Even maybe that doesn't look great because we're pushing down the top of this, but something to increase that tap target size.
Yeah. Let's do 5 top and bottom.
So 5 top and bottom. Here's the thing though. 5 top and bottom is going to create some space above it. So notice how that looks uneven right there. We could just select our link grid and now set it to -5 pixels on margin to offset that.
Yeah.
It still does not look aligned.
The sizing of those links are larger than the address.
You're saying that the 16 and 14. Excellent catch. So let's go back here. Let's make that 14 so they're the same size. That's a really good note. Do you even want to increase the tap target size on?
Yeah, let's do them.
What's your preference?
Let's do 5 and 5.
Okay, so 5. Let's do -5 to offset on, no, that's not correct. -5 on the grid to offset. So it's -5. Now, a lot of this is tedious. Negative margin, padding, whatever floats are. Why all this complexity? Well, the reason we're using this, the reason we're not just dropping stuff on a page or just starting with a template and hoping that we can make micro adjustments, the reason we're building this way is because it gives us complete control over how, not only how it looks, but how it responds on all devices. This is why the box model is the industry standard. Boxes stack on top of each other and stack next to each other based on the rules that we set. Can these rules get complicated? Yes, but it's so much better than a design that's just fixed in sort of a standard static view where you just resize it. If you think of something like a PowerPoint presentation, it has that fixed aspect ratio and then you scale down on a mobile device, it's not as legible. But of course, when we're talking about responsive design, we're talking about something that scales or reflows fully responsively. And that means all the rules we're applying are affecting this in real time. So it doesn't just have to work on a Pro Display XDR or on a 16-inch MacBook Pro. It works on all the devices on all the ranges because we've designed using responsive units. And of course, because we've used responsive rules, and these things, these boxes, are stacking on top of each other based on the rules that we applied. So sometimes it does get complex. Sometimes we're going to make mistakes. That's okay. We'll fix those mistakes and we'll continue to improve. So in this case, we made that adjustment. But a moment ago, we made that adjustment on tablet. So let's remove that because it's unnecessary. On tablet, we can remove, just option click, we can remove that 5. Notice how it's just inheriting it now. That value of 5 is now coming from the base breakpoint. And of course, on the link grid, let's remove that -5 margin because we just added it again to the base breakpoint. Okay, so we're looking good in tablet. And in mobile landscape, we're still looking okay.
Let's do it like this.
Okay.
Have it one column on social and center everything.
Okay, so one column in social, everything centered.
Yes.
So we'll go into our link grid. We'll remove that second column. So we have 1, and then you want to center everything. So let's do that on the footer itself. So we're playing by the rules of the parent most element. Center. But that centered the text. Notice how all the text is centered now. But that Carbeak logo, if we select that, let's go all the way to the top and take a look at our alignment options. We could just go and justify it to the center. And now the Carbeak logo itself is centered. So looking pretty good here. Carbeak logo, address, social. Is the spacing's okay here. You know, that spacing might be a little wide that we added to the footer grid.
Yeah.
What was it, 20?
40.
Or 40, okay. What about something like 25?
Yeah, that looks better.
Yeah. Okay. So Carbeak logo is the logo. Maybe the logo's fine. It is on mobile landscape. Let's take a look. How does that look on mobile?
Looks good.
Okay. So finally, mobile portrait. And that actually scaled nicely.
All right, is that our footer?
That is our footer. Now, we can always come back to this later. There are a lot of things we want to change. But just to note before we wrap up, something that's really, really important. We mentioned this before. Before we get into connecting a custom domain, before we get into publishing, it's always important that we're considering accessibility along the way. Accessibility isn't always just about contrast or the size of the tap targets. There are a lot of considerations. So one of the things that's top of mind here is we do have a lot of visual content, like this product image. And right now, if we navigate with a screen reader, we won't have any idea what's in the actual image. So let's go and make sure we make those changes. And the best way to do that, or the fastest way to apply to the whole project, is to do that in our Assets panel. So this JSON file, let's go in, and we're going to add descriptive text. So we'll say Carbic water bottle with cap being removed, revealing an ultraviolet light disinfecting the seltzer water inside. Is it the best description ever made?
It's sure is descriptive, yeah.
Okay. Let's go with your version.
My version?
What would you we'll just type what you want to write.
Water bottle cap with bright, glowing, extraordinary light from the future. Yeah.
That is not the, you know what? It's good for now. We can revise that a little bit later. There's a compromise between your version and the previous version. That, what is extraordinary light?
That's something in the future.
Okay, well, this is a good start. We can always come back to it and optimize. So this one, we have sort of that fizz button, the Carbic fizz button. What would you say for this one, descriptive text?
3 bottles from the top. No. What would you do?
3 Carbic bottles, top view, with CO2 charge indicators, or CO2 indicators at full charge, showing full charge, showing full charge. Something like that. We're getting a little bit closer. This hero image, we could do that. That's sort of we could say that's decorative. It does show a lot of the bottles and colors. We could, if we want to reuse this asset, we could add descriptive text to that. No, we don't want to delete it. Let's just say an assortment of Carbic water bottles in different colors. And we could do real simple logo. Wired logo. This one is the sort of base station, or Carbic water bottle being placed on the charging base station. Gizmodo.
I can do this one. Gizmodo logo. Yeah.
Great.
And this one is for sure Bloomberg logo.
What's up?
Just write Bloomberg logo.
Okay. All right, and of course, Carbic logo. So what did that just do? We just added descriptive text to all of these assets. What do we do with it now? Well, notice what happened. If we go to our product image here and we go and click the cog, we can see that it's using the alt text from that asset. So what that means is it's referencing. So we could actually drag in, if we copy and paste 1 billion times, as many instances as we have of this, it's going to reference, it's referencing the text from that asset. If we wanted the alt text to be different on one of these instances, we could always do that. We could click and change to do custom alt text. We can do a custom description. Or if it's just decorative, we can also mark it as decorative. For us, let's undo. So we're back to 1. But now each of our images, notice our product images here, they're all going to pull that alt text from the asset. One more note before we wrap up. Let's go to our page settings. This is a single page site. So we want to make sure, and under static pages for our homepage, we want to make sure that we're clearly defining our title tag. Introducing Carbic.
It's seltzer from the future.
Have you tried seltzer from the future yet? Neither have we, because our product is still in development. But when it's ready, it's going to change the world. And of course, we can continue to modify, we can continue to adapt for open graph title, open graph description, an open graph image, which is used, of course, in Twitter and Facebook posts. We can always just copy those straight from the description and tag up above. That's always a good way to do it. So it's just worth noting that going through our page settings is a great way to ensure that everything has been filled out before we publish our site. So let's press save. Now, that might be it. Sara, are we missing anything?
We created a navbar in the beginning of this lesson, and
The links.
Exactly, the links. We're never linking out.
Okay, so if we were to go right now and we click features or famous company logos or even sign up, nothing. So excellent point. How can we take care of that? Well, a few ways. We could go to section, the first section. So let's collapse all of this so we kind of have our page navigation. The first product section, and let's call it features. We'll just add features in the ID right here. And let's scroll down. The second one was featured in. So we can just do featured in. And notice how when we click out, it's going to add that hyphen there. So we featured in. And of course, this is our sign up section. So let's call this sign up. Again, it's going to add the hyphen automatically. So let's go back up to the top. Features. Where do we link? Well, we're going to link not to a separate page, not to an attachment that we upload, but let's go to a page section. Let's choose, of course, features for the first one. And let's do famous company logos. Let's do featured in. And of course, sign up. Let's route that to sign up. Now, when we go here, if we go to features, it takes us to features. If we go to famous company logos, it goes to famous company logos. And of course, if we go to sign up, it'll take us to sign up. What if we make the navbar persistent and we make it sticky?
I like them. Yeah.
So let's select our navbar and let's do a couple changes here. First off, let's change our position. Right now it's relatively positioned by default. Let's change it to sticky. Now, what is the difference between fixed and sticky? Fixed position and sticky. In fact, we can demonstrate it right here. Fixed position, notice how right now it just collapses, but we could set it to top and it looks fine. But notice what happened when we set it to fix. The hero section, the top of the hero section is actually hidden. We know that because if we were to set the navbar to maybe a more transparent background, we can see beneath that, of course, is our section, our hero section. So we're losing a little bit of that. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just the difference between fixed and sticky. Now, if we go to sticky, if we change it from fixed to sticky, notice how it pushes it down. Sticky position still respects the box model. So we're still seeing everything beneath it, but it's pushing down. It still takes up space on the page. So this may be the preference. So with sticky position, let's leave it there for now. We could also, just aesthetically, we could add a backdrop filter, kind of blur the content behind. So we see this sort of persistent blur effect behind. So we have that sense of context behind the navbar. But we can get a visibility. We can get a little bit of visibility behind it. We can even add another backdrop filter, maybe make it a little bit brighter. If we want to increase that brightness, add another backdrop filter to increase that saturation. So we're getting a little bit more of a saturated view. Maybe the brightness is a little high here, something like that. Sara, what do you think?
I like it, but what's going on with the blue here on the links?
Great call out. So as we go into these sections, so right now we're visible in the feature section. Down here, we get to famous company logos. It's showing that as the current state for the nav link. That's the default behavior. That's okay. So if we go over to style, like if we select any of our links by default like this, we're not going to see anything. It's just nav link. But if we go when it's on that current view, let's select that. Now we can modify the current. So right now it's defaulting to sort of a kind of blue view. We can override that by adding a font color. So what do you think about a bold red?
Let's maybe not do that and do the F1, F0,
F6.
F6.
Okay, what about F6, F6, F6?
Yes.
What if we actually go and change our original nav link? Let's try this for a second. Change our original nav link to this, the secondary text color, so that only when it's highlighted, now features is glowing. We have that extra call out to features. Now famous company logos is glowing. It's a little bit brighter, so we can get that sense of context. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I like that.
Okay, and then sign up, we could actually override that and just make sure that's always against maybe a CTA would always be a full white color against that pink, just for maximum contrast.
Exactly.
All right, so we're looking good. This looks good too. One more note here is the Carbeek logo. Let's click the brand and let's make sure this takes us, the link takes us right to our homepage or wherever we are. It could just take us to, we could just say we want it to take us to https://carbeak.com. And one more link, actually several more links down here. Since this is a completely fictional but totally real business, we don't have an Instagram, a Behance, a TikTok, a Dribbble, a LinkedIn, or a Twitter yet. So we'll leave these blank for right now. But of course, we want to go through and make sure that we were linking out and making sure each of these links works properly. Of course, we also have our submit button. So that submit button will define what happens when someone types in their name, their email, and then of course they press submit. So if we're looking for validation here, we can also set that up. There's a lot of things to check here, but that's okay. It's ensuring that we're going through every step that of course a user might want to. So we're gonna make sure this is required. The email is required, the name, maybe it's optional. Maybe in this case it can be required as well. What happens, just out of curiosity, what happens when this is submitted properly? Success. It's not the most legible thing in the world. So we could select our success message and maybe set that background color to just fully transparent. And maybe change the text to solid red.
No.
No?
Still no, yeah.
A green.
Green could actually work in this case.
Is this a beautiful green color?
Not really.
Okay, how can we make it a beautiful green color?
I think we can add a little bit more blue into it.
So over here?
Yeah. Starting to get there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
I
then
think
bold.
that's a beautiful green color. Yeah, bold.
And then huge text.
Maybe not that big, but doesn't matter. Yeah, that's great.
Okay, and then of course one more, we can go over to error state. So oops, something went wrong. If there's anything that goes wrong with submitting the form, we want to provide that clarity. So maybe same thing here, we can go with that error message, transparent, and then perhaps we can do...
We can actually do red now.
Okay, so red.
Maybe not that red.
Okay, higher opacity. When you say not that red, what do you mean? Just like a...
Less red?
Like that?
Yeah.
Well, that's basically white.
That's great.
Do you really want it 5 on the saturation level? Like it's quite, all right, you know what? It's nice. It's a very subtle red.
Detail.
It's the most subtle red.
Yeah.
Why don't we just make it white?
I sort of like it like this.
Okay, we'll keep it like that. And then for font size, we could also do 20 there. So we have something went wrong when submitting the form. So we have each of our states right there. We can just check with our form selected, we can check our normal state, what happens when it's successfully submitted, and of course, the error state. Something went wrong when submitting the form. Now, we could go in and say, maybe oops isn't professional enough for our brand, and we can just remove oops and say something went wrong while submitting the form. Please contact Sarah, so that everyone who has a problem submitting the form can contact you directly.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. But we're not going to provide any link information, so they're going to have to figure it out. Okay. Great.
Perfect.
So that's that, and we can switch this back to normal, so we see what we're doing here. That looks good. Now, did we catch everything? Is this perfect? No, not yet. We'll want to go through, we'll want to test this, we'll want to publish this to our staging domain to start. So this is, let's just publish to our selected domains, so we can kind of see what this looks like on a published site. And it always helps to test this on different browsers, different devices to see how our design responds, how our developed website responds in different conditions. So we can click this and take a look at the published site. And of course, we can scroll through and experience the published site. Look at that Lottie animation as we scroll all the way down to the footer. All right, that is the site build, an entire landing page, a complete website that is ready to go.
Teamwork.
That's absolutely right. They say a lot about teamwork. Teamwork is the holy grail.
Dreamwork.
What's that?
Dreamwork.
Oh, that's a production company. But there are lots of things we can learn from working as a team. It's actually an excellent book, Doris Kearns Goodwin,
Yeah.
Team of Rivals. But the thing to note about this is we finished the site, and in the next not nearly as long lesson, we'll connect the site to a custom domain so we can publish it to our main.com. Unrelated, but we recently purchased the rights to so we can publish to our main.com. So check that out if you haven't already. And no, we didn't stop there. We also purchased so we can publish to our main.com.biz, so we can publish to our main.com.cloud, so we can publish to our main.com.agency, and of course, so we can publish to our main.com.buzz. But that's an overview of building a complete, fully animated, fully responsive landing page in the Webflow Designer.
What a journey, but we want to see your progress. Even if your site is a work in progress, share your web designs using #Figma to Webflow. Even if it's just a work in progress. Grimmer, you already said this. Oh, did I? Anyway, share your site using #Figma to Webflow, even if it's just a work in progress.